stuff. Have you guys seen this stuff that's been happening? So I guess Brendan had a little conversation about it on his show, the Schaub show, where he was talking about this issue that I guess DC is having with Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal and maybe some other people as well in MMA or in UFC, sorry, who are kind of criticizing him and coming after him in general. Personally, I don't get it because DC seems like a cool dude, but I also know from being a UFC casual, just watching it from the outside looking in, that he is a bit of a company man since he's been with the UFC. He decided to make excuses. He decided to kind of like ignore all the stuff that people have problems with the UFC when it comes to Dana White and match making and, you know, rankings and title shots and stuff. He like makes excuses for them, and essentially he's like a male Megan O'Leary, right? He's a bit of a company man, which is you know, it is what it is. But I can understand why some fighters who are obviously trying to change things, or obviously trying to force UFC into giving them what they want, why they wouldn't like him, because he's not someone that's going to champion anything they say because he wants to keep his job. But then I'm also aware that, you know, personality wise, it's understandable why these two guys wouldn't get on with someone like him, right? Because they're, you know, they're two people that have never really kissed the ring or, you know, bowed down on their knees or to anybody in their entire lives. So it makes sense why somebody like a DC would kind of rub them up the wrong way. But also, they are, guess what, fighters, so it makes complete sense, right? Why they would have that kind of a point of view. It doesn't matter how big DC is, they're still, you know, they're still flipping, you know, trained flipping killers who go into the ring and essentially annihilate each other with their hands, knees, elbows, you know, wrist, legs, whatever it may be. So clearly they're not going to have an issue with it. But this has been like an ongoing issue. I guess you got a headline here: he would destroy them from a UFC, from a UFC warns heavyweight, warns Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, and other fighters taking shots at Daniel Cormier. And obviously that's Brendan talking about it. And there's another article here that kind of explains it a bit more. After I think DC made some comments about Nate Diaz, basically saying that he thought Nate Diaz would get destroyed by Hamzat, and he's lucky, or that he's happy he didn't get the fight or whatever against Hamzat in the end, because I don't think he'd win. And I guess Nate Diaz didn't take that well, and basically called DC a fat motherfucker and stuff, and, you know, all this stuff, respect your OG, you fat motherfucker. And obviously Daniel Cormier replied back in a quite, you know, lethal and deadly way, Nathan, relax, right? Which is quite clearly a warning. Like, if you keep going, it's going to get worse. And I think Jorge Masvidal was the same situation too, if I'm not mistaken. You know, just, you know, general fighter beef and talking back and forth. Now, the funny thing about it is Brendan's comments around it, because as per usual, in classic Brendan Schaub way, this has really nothing to do with him. And again, I don't think it's really that much of an issue. I understand why Nate Diaz would have an issue with what Daniel Cormier said, especially Nate Diaz's personality. I don't think he takes constructive criticism well at all. He's obviously going to always think that you're trying to sun him, and he's always going to go to level 100 just who he is, why we love the guy. And Jorge Masvidal is the same thing too. He's had his issues with the UFC and Dana in terms of his contract situation, his opportunity to get belts, blah, blah, blah. It makes sense why they'd have an issue with the UFC and Dana White. And also makes sense why DC wouldn't agree with what they say, because he's a company man. But I don't see why this involves Brendan. Like, this just involves those guys. They can sort it out between each other. Like, they're all grown men. If they want to meet up in the gym and throw, you know, and throw hands, they can. But this idea that it somehow is parallel to what Brendan's going through as a person doesn't make any sense. But clearly, the guy used the opportunity to just insert himself and make it all about him, which is clever and kind of classic Brendan Schaub. We kind of use the situation that DT's going through with Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal to basically talk about himself and basically try to make it seem try to make it seem as if he's
the big man on campus.
Sorry, trying to make it seem as if he's sending somewhat a not so subtle message, right? That if you keep testing him, you know, if he ever crosses path with you, he will destroy you, which is obvious, isn't it? Because he's a flipping trained, you know, MMA fighter, and he's fought in the UFC as a heavyweight. Clearly, he's going to beat most people up in the world. But it's very strange how he kind of latched onto this. It's a really funny story and made it all about himself, and it has nothing to do with him. So let's play the clip and hear what he has to say.
People feel like, oh, it's okay to take shots at him. He's a big guy. He's not going to do anything, which I get it too. You know what I'm saying? Trust me, I get that. You don't want to come off as a bully. But I'm telling you, man, anybody who's taking shots at DC, keep that same energy. If DC was being serious, you guys would get fucked up. But you know he's not going to do anything because he's a professional and he works for the UFC commentating team. But if he wasn't,
why do I feel like he's saying that about himself too? Because even in the beginning he said, you know, you don't want to go back and forth who's knowing you're going to come across as a bully, because he said that a lot. He said that during the aftermath of the whole Kalila stuff, right, and Annie stuff, like, I don't want to be a bully or whatnot. I don't know, some nonsense stuff, like some weird backhanded compliment type thing that he did. Very strange.
You guys wouldn't be taking shots at him, and also the only reason taking shots at him is because he's doing so well. That's another reason they're taking.
Oh my god! Oh my god! This brain that these guys have, right, where just because you're doing well, it means that you're kind of impervious to criticism, that it doesn't exist. No one can criticize anything that you do when you're doing well, which is insane. Why do critics exist if that was the case? Why does social media, for the most part, why do people have opinions? Why do people have barbershop debates and stuff? Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just such a bizarre way to go around it. And also, in general, forget that kind of analogy. That doesn't make any sense. Forget all that. If you're doing so well and it doesn't matter, why would it matter also to even bring it up? Because you're doing well, isn't it? Like, it doesn't matter if people have wrong things to say about it. The fact that you're still able to, pay your house bill, put gas in your car, take your kids to school, wear fancy trainers and fancy clothes is everything. That should be the only signifier you need to show yourself that you're doing well. You don't need anybody to kind of pat you on the back and give you a big review, because the things that you care about, the materialistic stuff and the stuff that goes on social media, is clearly working. So it doesn't make any sense. It's just a load of nonsense. It's kind of like a weird self-cope. Do you know what I mean? I'm doing well. Okay, cool, you're doing well, but people still think what you're doing is crap. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't actually matter, really, for the most part.
Shots at him. It's gonna get traction if you talk shit about DC. But I would love to see if people kept that same.
What? No one talks about DC to get traction. Those guys are attacking him because they have an issue of what he said. Both of them have a very, again, you could think what they have. You could both think, you're allowed to think that Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz are being childish. You're allowed to think that they're being petty. You're allowed to think that they're overreacting. But they clearly have an issue with DC, and he has an issue with them. So they're going back and forth. It happens all the time. There is no, it's not bigger or smaller than that. It just is what it is. So I don't see, but again, he's basically trying to internalize and make it by himself, as per usual.
Tony Ferguson talks shit about him. Fucking Diaz, right? Jorge Masvidal. There's been other guys that take shots at DC. I'm telling you, man, he beat everybody I just listed. He beat up all at the same time, if he wanted to. But Daniel's smart, professional, gentle soul.
Also, this idea that MMA fighters couldn't lose a fight against other MMA fighters, especially if they were outnumbered, is pretty mad. I know weight classes matter, but could you legitimately, again, I know I'm being picky here, but let's be honest. Could you legitimately think that DC could beat up 3 trained UFC guys at the same time? Really? Is that what we're saying here? Unless we're not talking about flipping, what they call what's his name? We're not talking about flyweights and shit. We're talking about like middleweights, lightweight. You honestly think if you put 3 lightweights in the octagon with him, and you have to fight them all at the same time, that he would win? Like, what does this even mean? That thing only works with regular people. If you say, if you put 5 of my haters in the octagon with me, yeah, you probably would, because all you have to do is knock out 2 really badly, and the other 3 would probably shit their pants and start crying or faint. That makes sense. But if you put 3 fighters in against 1 fighter, I would put my money on the 3 all the time. I've watched those Russian videos of them fighting where they have 3 against 1, and it always ends with the one getting absolutely stomped to hell, because there's no way you can fight 3 trained assassins. It just doesn't work out. This is not fucking It Man. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about?
And he's gonna be like, okay, dude, now he'll defend himself like this. Like, dude, calm the fuck down. But if DC got serious, you want to keep pulling that lion's tail, be careful what you ask for.
Oh, this analogy as well, this lion tail thing he's been hanging around with BGL too long. What's this lion tail pulling thing? You're not a lion. There's nothing lion-y about you in the slightest. No one's pulling your tail. It's just, and the lion pulling tail thing analogy is interesting too, because it gives the impression that he's just minding his business, just out there overlooking his kingdom, seeing what he can eat, seeing what, lioness he can bloody plow. No, like, you're actively participating in culture. You're putting out dumb things. You're saying dumb things. The people are responding to dumb things you say. That's all that's basically happening. It's really not that deep. but he thinks he's just like, you know, not offending anyone, not doing anything. It's just like, bruv, you've done a lot of things that people generally don't like. They're commenting on it. They have strong opinions about it. And that's basically the part of what it is. It's like nothing of what he's saying is relating to DC. This is all to do with him, basically. That's basically what I'm getting at.
Because if DC wanted to, he'd twist every single one of your necks off. But he doesn't. So you guys keep taking shots at him.
Yeah. I mean, DC lately, before he was more kind of like more politically correct, but now he's starting to open up and just be completely honest about how he feels.
Be himself, so guys get mad.
Yeah.
The only people more sensitive than fighters are comics, but they're very similar. So if you say anything about a comic, say anything about a fighter, especially a fighter, they're gonna...
You're talking about yourself, bro. You're talking about, he's essentially the most sensitive person to ever walk the face of the earth, is what he's saying is true. If MMA fighters or UFC fighters in particular are very sensitive, and he's also a comedian who are also very sensitive, that would mean that he is the most sensitive person that's ever walked the face of the earth, which is weird, kind of humble brag, in it, kind of backward compliment thing he's doing. I am the most sensitive person in the world, actually. Everything affects me the worst. Like, that's not nice. That is not nice. It's like, how can you brag about being sensitive? How can you brag about being the guy that's been hurt the most? I may be big. I may be able to twist your face off from your neck. I may be able to run through you and put you through a glass window or door or wall, whatever it may be. But I'm sensitive. That's not nice. God damn.
Take it personal. And they fire shots at you. All good. Mm-hmm. I would love to keep that same energy. Keep pulling on that lion's tail, man. You better pray to God that lion in the suit doesn't turn around. You boys would all be in trouble.
Remember when DC...
Oh, shut up, Chin. You know what's funny, yeah? Someone said here, Andy SVT said, comics and fighters are as similar as a fork and a cereal. Another not funny says, most comics can take criticism. Exactly. That's why I don't even buy this whole thing, because how many fight cards have you watched where they've had, how many fight cards have you watched where they've been an interview inside the octagon, especially prelims? You see them interviewing the fighter in the thing, and they'll be watching the replay of their knockout, and then they'll say, oh yeah, I was watching tape of this guy in the gym, and I could see that he sometimes dips to the left when he's about to throw an uppercut or whatever thing that he analyzed, and I knew how to counter it, and obviously I did it. Happy for my team. That's a big sign that these guys watch tape. They see their mistakes. They see the things that they correct well, and they kind of apply it in the octagon. One time, Brendan was on his show with Eric Griffin, and I think Eric was kind of criticizing or going at Brendan's stand-up, saying that, hey, your stand-up is terrible, man. Like, you're striking in the octagon and stuff. And he was like, oh, didn't you ever watch tape on people or see your flaws? Why didn't it really improve over the time that you were fighting? And he basically said that he never watched tape. So during his entire UFC career, he'd never watched any tape of himself and tried to improve. He just let his kind of, his coaches do that for him. So they'd watched it for him and they'd basically try and correct it in the gym, which is a pretty gnarly way to go about it. But it kind of says a lot about what he kind of ended up being in terms of a person, where he's unable to actually see the errors in his way because he doesn't really actually analyze his mistakes, or doesn't even see them as mistakes in the first place. So it's a very bizarre way to go about it, and also to kind of group everybody in the same way, that we're all the same, we're like this, we're sensitive. It's like, no, some fighters are sensitive, but some fighters are also able to take criticism and say, you know what, this wasn't good and I'm going to try and come back better. I know what I can improve on. I've heard what people said, blah 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 blah. But he couldn't do that, and maybe that also explains why he ended up quitting in the first place. Do you know what I mean? Because there wasn't any point that he could reflect and think he could improve on, because he thought, I'm the best at what I can do right now. I can't